I've been waiting all day for this. Baron, my handsome man.
Hi, human.
Hey, babe, you ready? All right, let's roll it.
So welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Soul Sense. I feel so lucky today. I have Dora, who's a guest of mine, who I will admittedly say I stumbled across through social media, through another friend of mine, did a little bit of social media stalking, and now she's joining us from Puerto Vallarta, from Mexico today. So I'm quite honored. Dora, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I'm going to get you to give us a quick rundown of what it is that you do for a living first, and then we'll kind of spin off from there a little bit.
Okay, well, for a living, I'm not really making a living at doing what I'm doing, but I'm working on some big passion projects. I got clean and sober here in Mexico August 2018. I had a little bit of a slip up, and it will be my 2 years on Wednesday. I'll be celebrating 2 years clean and sober. So
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm not really making a living at it yet, but I'm working in that direction. I have started a brand called Soberoso. It's one word, and oso is the word for bear. So in Spanish, so it's the non-drinking, non-using bear. And I started a brand with this name. I started making t-shirts that have recovery-related messages. When I first came into recovery, I had recently been to Amsterdam, and I went into one of my first meetings, with this brand new shirt from the red light district, and I was like, wow, I can't wear this kind of message, like I gotta change everything, So I started designing some funny sayings and some recovery related clothing, because I started realizing around me I had so many subliminal messages of alcohol, the things hanging on my walls in my home were like everything to do with it's wine o'clock somewhere, everything around me had to do with drinking, the clothes I wore, the decorations in my home. I chose to paint my walls the color because it was called vodka tonic, like everything was based around my alcoholism. So I started with the Soberoso, making t-shirts and selling them just kind of like a pop-up trunk. And then I got a website, Facebook, and an Instagram account, all under that name. And when COVID hit, I was just launching an idea. I had found a location here in Mexico, and I was going to open like a social drop-in center, because this is a party town in Puerto Vallarta. And when people get sober and they're young in recovery, and it's Friday night and now you don't drink, there's no real place for us, If you want to go and dance still, or you want to hang out, like it's everything surrounded with alcohol, So I had this grand vision to open up like a little drop-in center that was, for sobriety. And I was supposed to sign the 1-year lease on April 1st. I had put a deposit in to the building. I was already doing renovations, and then COVID hit. And I had to make a really tough decision. I was, they were just starting to talk about possibly closing the schools down, and about possibly, closing the public places down for the first 15 days, the onset of COVID. The borders weren't closed yet. And it was like, who would have imagined where we are today with how far this has come? So I made a very hard decision, and then I had to pull out. I lost some money, and I thought, my whole concept is around people gathering, and I just can't go through with this. Although, my heart had led me there. I felt like my higher power was, showing me the way to open the doors, and everything was lining up to have this place. I had to make a tough decision. So I pulled out of that 1-year lease contract, and then we went into lockdown, and I dove into my website for Soberoso, where I started sharing other people's recovery stories. And then in June, I started up the Soberoso podcast, where we invite guests and listeners from around the world to join us in sharing our passion for recovery.
I love that. I love that so much. You said there's just so much gold I find in what you said. And as someone who's just celebrated, I celebrated my 1 year clean of alcohol in the end of October.
Nice.
But 4 years, yeah, I know you get there and you're like, I think I just did 13 months now. And it's such an amazing feeling. And then I'm 4 years in my 4th year clean of a dangerous relapse that I had with cocaine, which in my younger years was my drug of substance. And so you said something really important, which is when we kind of take this journey into recovery, we don't realize maybe how much that every day is littered with triggers, right? From everything that we do. I mean, you walk into, there's a gift store here in town that you walk into, and everywhere you look, it has to do with, I drink because I'm a mom, or like, it's just absolutely everywhere in doing that. Was that one of the hardest pieces for you when you had to step away, or did you have to move away from relationships, like those kinds of things? Like, you say your home was really embodied by it, but what about those relationships and people outside of your home? How did you find that?
Well, my recovery, first of all, I drank and drugged for 30 years. And in my last 10 years, I drank every single day. And I never knew when those, 6 to 8 maintenance drinks would turn into a 5-day bender. I got into, I did every drug except for heroin. And in the last days, in the last couple of years, it was awful. And my recovery coincided with walking out on a very toxic relationship. And when I walked out from this relationship that was fueled by drugs and alcohol, I really was utterly hopeless and helpless. I had lost friends. I had lost family relationships because of this narcissistic man that I was with that, I thought he loved me in the beginning, and I was trying to fight for something that I now realize I was just a game to him all along, So when I did come into recovery, I mean, getting sober, it was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, I drank and drugged for everything, and more so when I couldn't handle what was going on outside of me. So to break up with this man and walk away and not get utterly shit-faced over it is the first miracle right there. So I walked out of this relationship, and I left at 2 a.m. from our home with a carry-on suitcase and my little dog, and I checked into a hotel. And when I got to that hotel, I hadn't slept in 2 days, and I fell on my knees and I cried out to a God that I hadn't talked to in many years of my life, and begged for help to get away from this man. Like I was so disgusted with myself that I didn't have the backbone to walk away from this toxicity. I was drowning in it. So the next day, I decided to move my location because closer to town so I could walk around easier. And I grabbed a beer, got in a taxi, and on that taxi ride, I had this thought, maybe if I stop drinking and drugging, I would have the strength to stay away from this relationship. And that in itself is a crazy thought because, like I said, drinking and drugging was my solution. I mean, that's what got me through the hard shit. You know, drink enough, I drug enough to not feel. So to be walking out with the clothes on my back and starting life over again at 45 years old from scratch and have a thought of after this whole thing that I'm not going to drink over it. You know, it was the first time I ever associated my strength and my courage with my drinking habits. So 2 days later, I ended up in my first meeting, and you know, I started hearing people talk about blackouts, things I never talked to anybody about. You know, I never shared with people when I blacked out. I was always trying to control my drinking in my own way by, you know, if I do enough coke with it, I won't black out. Or if I do a quarter hit of acid on Friday, every night on Friday at 5 o'clock, I won't black out on Sunday. Like, you know, I had all these chaos,
all the math equations done.
trying to balance out my blackouts. And, you know, like I said, never talking about it. I was embarrassed about this, you know, but I was aware of these blackouts for many years. So when I did come into recovery and I started hearing, you know, other alcoholics and addicts that were talking like about me and about ways that I had behaved and felt, I really heard a message of hope in these meetings. And I couldn't believe that these, you know, former drunks and drug addicts were laughing about shit that was fucking killing me. You know, it wasn't funny when I first walked in the door.
Right.
Now with a little time under my belt, I can look back and, you know, laugh at some of my behaviors. But when I first started the journey, you know, I was completely devastated. Nothing was funny to me. You know, I was spent. So when I started this recovery journey, sorry, I got really straight off there, but to answer your question, excuse me, yeah, I did have to cut off a lot of my friendships. You know, like I said, this relationship, I had already lost touch with a lot of my friends anyways because of this relationship I was in. So I really had to change everything about me. And I surrounded myself with the recovery community. And I think it had been about 2 months, you know, I'd go to 2 or 3 meetings a day because if I was in a meeting, I wasn't thinking about drinking or drugging. And like I said, I drank every day and drugged probably 6 days of those weeks, 6 days a week. So yeah, it had been about 2 months. And the first time I went out, I went to a friend's restaurant. He has a ladies' night every Wednesday night where he has, you know, a nice restaurant and DJs, and a lot of my friends hung out there. And that was the first place I went. But I had to change things up. Like for the first time I went there and I actually ate a meal, you know, before I'd go there and pre-drink it, or I hadn't slept for a couple days by the time I'd show up, you know, everything was party. So I did have to change my surroundings in the beginning of recovery, you know, until that obsession to drink and drug was lifted. Because in the beginning, it was really fighting an obsession, you know. I drank, you know, I drank, like I said, every day. And especially, you know, when the sunset went or when it was happy hour, I never ordered anything at a restaurant that didn't have alcohol in it. You know, that was a waste of money. Why would I do that?
Right.
So
well, it's almost like you come to the realization, and I think one of the biggest things that I realized was, and one of the things, like I'm also in school right now studying mental wellness and addiction, because it's forever now a journey of mine to figure out, first off, who we're putting out there in the world to help assist people like you and I who are moving through those things, what's missing and that kind of thing. But one of the big questions that always lands with me is that we need to stop asking individuals why the addiction, and we have to start asking why the pain, right? And so the way that you say that is that, and we were really good at not only coping with everything that we were hiding by just drinking it away, but it was our way of celebrating, coping, you know, just managing and balancing every aspect of our life that way. And at what point in your recovery, Dora, did you start really dealing with the pain that you were feeling that led you to start drinking in the first place? Or when did that realization hit you, that that's really what we're all doing when we turn to substance in some way or in an addictive way? I think we can use substance recreationally. There are people who can, and they're not running from pain. But when did that connection happen for you?
Wow, that is a really good question. Well, you know what? I consider myself still a newcomer in recovery, and I think I will be for the first 5 years. And it's, 30 years of drinking and drugging. I'm just beginning to scratch the surface. One thing when I first started my journey that I heard and I realized is that it's not a drinking and drugging problem. It's a thinking problem. The drinking and drugging is only a symptom. It's a symptom of underlying causes. So I am, the first year that I was in recovery was hell. Like I got clean and sober, and my ex, who I shared property with, went 10 times worse into addiction. And the stuff I had to go through with him and his psycho behaviors was, I can't believe I didn't drink or drug over. So, I'm just beginning to unravel those patterns. And one of the realizations that I've had, it's crazy because more is always revealed, and I feel like the more I know, the less I understand. It's like I should be getting smarter in this, but I'm feeling like almost more lost.
More comes out. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Like I should be getting better, but now I'm actually feeling like I really don't know anything at all.
Except for, I'll challenge that. The one thing that you do know is that it all feels better in a sober mind. And I can say that I thought when I was in it, the best way I could feel was there. And although it's challenging even a year in, I feel like I've been given the biggest gift I've ever received in my life by the ability to walk away from it. And even through times like COVID, I think in the United States in the first 3 months of COVID, and I only have their statistics, alcohol sales went up over 240%, which is mind-blowing when we're trying to tell people to stay safe, but here, like, take this ethanol and go do this thing that you want to do with it. And so I don't know if you can reflect the same way, but not drinking at this point in time is a superpower, I feel. And what do you think about that?
Oh, I agree with you. I've been through several what I thought were end of the world parties. When Y2K hit in 1999, it was like, in my head, I had envisioned Mad Max coming, like the whole world was going to be torn apart from the technology crash. Like, I had built it up for months ahead. I was saving front pages of newspapers, like that it was going to be some historic archive.
Right.
Like, I really thought like the world was going to go to Mad Max in 99. I partied in that, I came back to Mexico in 2012, which was the predicted Mayan calendar end of the world, December 12th, 2012. I went to party for that in a little island away from here. About 5 years ago, there was this massive hurricane that was predicted to hit here that didn't, where it was supposed to be massive destruction with three hurricanes that were heading our way, the whole town on a lockdown. All of those devastating things, what I did to prepare was buy alcohol, cigarettes, candles, and I think a couple cans of tuna and lots of drugs. If I had done that in this pandemic of COVID, I would be fucking dead, because that is the way that my brain works. Get enough drugs and enough alcohol. If it's the end of the world, I'm going to party it out. And if I had done that in this pandemic, I would have spent everything with no end in sight. I wouldn't have thought about the food. I wouldn't have thought about the rent. I wouldn't have thought about a shelter over my head. It would just be like, this is the end days. Let's party. And 5, 6 months into it, I would have been dead by now. So I am so happy to be sober, you know. I'm happy to be sober in this time, and another really great benefit that has come out of this whole thing is what you and I are doing right now. You know, you're in Canada and I'm in Mexico, and we're having a Zoom chat, going into meetings around the world, to Ireland, to New York, to Chicago, any hour, any minute of any day. I wasn't doing any of this before this pandemic hit. So I feel like we do have a superpower, because people that aren't alcoholics and aren't addicts, I don't think they have this same tool that you and I do to plug in and feel like you're part of a community with complete strangers in opposite sides of the world. It is a superpower, you know. We have tools to work with.
I love that. That's now another question I want to ask you is, what do you turn to now as your healthy coping mechanisms when things become difficult? Because, like many people kind of turn to alcohol and substance or whatever it was that they were doing when COVID hit. I turned to increasing my personal training, making sure that I was jumping on and having social interactions with people through the screen and that kind of thing, focusing on my yoga. My dog is my biggest form of therapy for me. I call him my mental health dog. I give him all of the credit in saving my life, pretty much, to move forward in that. So what do you do now to cope when difficult situations are coming up where you used to turn to alcohol?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's another great question. And I have had a couple complete mental breakdowns during this pandemic. One thing that recovery has given me is people in my life to call. In my drinking and drugging, I never wanted to burden people with my problems. I never wanted to call or could reach out and say, I'm going through something, I need help. Those words couldn't come out of my mouth. And so now I do have a community of people. I have a sponsor that I can call when shit's about to hit the fan and talk to. I have other people that I can reach out to. My dog also is my little hero. I've got a little wiener dog, and he's my cuddle buddy. Like, I totally spoon with him at night in bed, and he loves to be in bed as much as I do. And another thing for me, through these couple of breakdowns in the last month, I'm really learning more about myself in sobriety. I'm learning what triggers me, and one of the biggest things is taking on too much, is getting overwhelmed, and also being a sounding board to other friends' problems. I suck in energy too easily. And this was the source of my last breakdown. It had nothing to do with me. Through the help of another person, I was able to see that this situation of a friend was triggering me, but I couldn't even see it with my own eyes. I'm just trying to be her friend. And I had a complete breakdown that lasted about 2 weeks. So when I've gone through these types of experiences, what I really have to do is completely unplug. And I mean, like, I have to bring all the focus back to me. I have to get selfish, and I have to learn to love myself. And that's babying myself. That means canceling appointments. That means completely turning my phone off, completely going off of social media. And I have to get back to basics. That's getting up in the morning. I listen to 6 to 8 hours a day of self-affirmations, of learning to accept myself and love myself, and trying to retrain my brain after years of just negative thought patterns, abuse, surviving abuse, and then my own negative self-talk of, I should be better, I should do better, I should know better, people are better off without me, this chaos that's been in my mind for my entire life. So, yeah, replanting my brain with, I listen to affirmations to sleep, guided meditations. And when I wake up in the morning, more uplifting, like how to tackle the day, like literally 6 to 8 hours a day. And journaling, sitting down with a coffee, journaling, meditating, and getting into nature has been really huge for me. There's a lot of really nice parks where I am, like big, huge, palm trees and trees. And I'm in the jungle here where I'll take my dog out, and I'm really amazed by big trees. So I get out and I find a gorgeous tree to take a picture of, and I stand right under the trunk of it and look way up into the sky with the blue cutting through the leaves. And I find so much power in trees. And I think that when I'm outside, I know when I'm outside in a park setting like that, looking at a tree, I am actually in the moment. And when I'm in the moment and present, that is when I have peace. When I start, remembering the past or getting anxious about the future is when my head starts spinning. So when I'm one with nature, that is when I can actually be here now. And that is a difficult thing for me to do, but nature gives that to me, to actually be in the present moment.
I love that. Dora, just the energy that I sense from you, you're so empowering to me. And I think the more individuals that I meet who have chosen this path, when it's not easy and every day we are pushed to go in the opposite direction, it's just, you're such an inspiration to me. And I just feel so grateful that I got to sit with you today and have that conversation. And now if people are looking for you and they want to jump on and they want to hear the podcast or any of the pieces that you're offering along your journey, where can we find you?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. You can find the website, Instagram, and Facebook all under the same name, Soberoso. So that's one word, sober, and then OSO. You can get on the website and check out our recovery clothing line. You can listen to our podcast directly at soberoso.com. And you can also find us on Spotify, Breaker, Apple, Google, Public Radio, Pocket Cast, Outcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you will find Soberoso just by clicking it into the search bar.
I'm actually looking forward to tearing into what you have available. And for some reason, I sense too, this is the first of many conversations that you and I are going to have and will continue to have, because like I said, not only are you an inspiration to me, but you're going to be someone that I turn to in, my times of needing strength from the outside and reaching for that kind of thing. So I just want to thank you again for sharing your beautiful self with us today and for taking time to talk about your story, because the more that we can normalize what sober living is and the benefits of it to other people, I just think the more impact we can have in helping others maybe find the same thing that they perhaps are struggling with. So I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And yes, call me, reach out anytime. And I hope we do have another conversation soon.
We absolutely will. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.